Hi, I'm Ghislaine Halpenny and I'm Director of ESG and Corporate Affairs at Regal London.
From Ackroyd Lowry, I'm Oliver Lowry.
And I'm John Ackroyd.
And this is Urban Forecast, the show where we talk to the people defining the future of our cities. We discuss their background, what drives them, and the insights they've learnt along the way.
This is a podcast for anyone who's interested in how we live, work or play in the cities of the future and what that means for the built environment today.
So Ghislaine, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I would love to know a bit about your journey from studying law or before, you pick whenever you want to start, into the role that you're at now.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks for inviting me here today. Where did I start? I started off reading English literature in Mile End at Queen Mary University of London, then a law conversion course and graduated in the sort of most miserable time of the GFC, 2009. Also realised at the same time I didn't really know any happy junior lawyers and that everyone was quite happy once they rose to senior ranks, but there was a fair amount of misery up until then and it wasn't really particularly appealing. And needed a job, so I applied for all sorts of things, and property was always the thing that appealed to me. I quite like the kind of tangible nature of it all. And ended up as an intern at the British Property Federation a very long time ago now, and meant to stay for 3 months and stayed for 12 years.
What did the British Property Federation do, for those who don't know?
So the British Property Federation, or the BPF, was the commercial real estate body. So it was the representative body for the commercial real estate sector. So we represented everybody from the likes of land sector, BL to Grow, and then all of the kind of peripheral people around the edge of that. And I was there for a long time and ended up as the Director of Strategy and External Affairs there. And then decided to make the move in-house. So was really keen to go somewhere where I could really get a proper flavour of what happens under the bonnet. One of the things about being a lobbying organisation is you see where all the problems are, you see where all the bits that stick are, and you deal with government, and that's great, but you never actually see how the process works from A to Z. And one of the amazing things about Regal London is that gives me a real opportunity to do that. We have everything under one roof, and it's a founder-led business set up just over 25 years ago now. And we have everything from our land and planning team all the way through to sales and marketing, and then over half of our colleagues are on the construction arm as well. So with that kind of in-house construction ability, we really cover everything, and it's amazing to be able to be part of that.
And so the BPF, I think you mentioned it was mainly focused on the commercial sector. So Regal predominantly residential led. Is that sort of doubling the kind of the learning curve of the job, that you're seeing the other side behind the curtain and also in a slightly different sector?
Yeah, I suppose there's an overlap around the kind of institutional side. So at the BPF, we represented everyone in commercial real estate, by which we meant any real estate that you could derive an income from. So that included build to rent.
Yeah.
So we had a huge raft of build to rent providers there. So I got to know that sector really quite well. Regal London is, as you say, traditionally built for sale, but very much one of the advantages of being an entrepreneurial founder-led business is we have the ability and the agility to turn our hand to whatever the market dictates or whatever we feel will be best. So whilst traditionally it's very much been for sale, actually, if I look across the pipeline of what we've got ahead of us at the moment, it ranges from later living to PBSA to build to rent to then some sustainable office buildings as well, and retail.
It is amazing. I do think developers are the most ingenious organisations, I think. You see it at the moment, everybody's suddenly going, oh, we're co-living specialists or we're VRS specialists. And basically it's because at the moment it's really hard if you're selling every flat and all your profits stuck in the last 10% of the flats you've got to sell. Obviously, these sort of institutional exits suddenly become far more interesting. But obviously they come with having to relearn or learn new skills. Is that part of why Regal were keen to bring you in, to make sure that they understood selling to institutions?
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm potentially in a wrong place. I think it was partly that, and I think it was partly one of the things that as we get bigger as an organisation, we need someone who can really look after the kind of reputational side of life, whether that be through our social media work, whether it be through the way we talk to government and politicians, whether the way we talk to local politicians, but then also ESG. And that all just about ties together in one bucket that I look after. And for me, I've always, corporate comm side is rather sadly probably where I'm most comfortable in. My first love is around words and how we can tell those stories. But then increasingly social impact in particular. And I have a really strong belief that we are a misunderstood sector. We're a sector that has the opportunity and the ability to really change people's life chances. And not only do people not understand that when we talk to our kind of key stakeholders in the general public, but we're not particularly good as a sector at telling that story. So really trying to shift that around and make sure that we're positioning ourselves in the best way possible to tell that story properly.
And I think it is a good story. I sat down with Simon, one of the founders at MIFIM, and he told me the story from starting from setting up the business to now. And I think with ESG, particularly, well, with our clients, I think we noticed that in the commercial sector, there's a big focus on the E, because the E is quite easy. So if you're a pension fund manager, say, and you've got this portfolio of offices, making sure that the architects and the contractors understand that the environmental impact of the building is going to be very important to the future tenants is quite easy, because it's spreadsheet driven, and that's an area that fund managers are quite comfortable with. The S, the social element, I think is much harder for them, other than trying to make sure that their contractors employ their contractors. It's definitely a harder thing, and I thought Simon spoke very passionately about the work that you guys are doing. Do you want to explain a bit about what Regal is?
Sure. As you say, I think the E is really hard, but it's certainly something that people are doing more of, and it's certainly something that the industry has.
Demonstrate the outcome.
It's easier to demonstrate the outcome. It's easy to have a sort of green flavour to things. It's less easy to have an impactful flavour when it comes to the S. I'll stop the analogy there. And so what we're doing, so we took the view a couple of years ago, so this was before I joined Regal, and the arrangement we made, and I stepped in and run it on a day-to-day basis. We partner with an organisation called Building Heroes, and Building Heroes train people coming out of the forces, so service leavers in construction. And for us, this is a massive win-win situation. We're not only getting to open our doors at an early stage and provide people with a real look behind the hoarding on day one and explain who we are and potentially provide them with employment opportunities, but because we have that in-house construction arm, we're also growing our own talent. And one of the changes over the last couple of years with the impact of Brexit was obviously that we lost a huge number of people from our sector. And rather than leaping up and down and banging on doors and complaining and moaning, we thought we'd actually do something about it. So we have 2 construction academies. We have one in Watford that's been running for about a year now, which has seen between 60 and 70, about 65 odd people go through it. Everyone who's wanted a job, who's wanted employment within our sector at the end of that has walked away with a job. Lots of people do it to become self-employed. Lots of people do it because actually they really want to get used to being back in the civilian world. And then we've also just launched a new academy in Wembley. So we have a couple of sites in Brent, academy in Wembley, similar kind of numbers going through. And the thing that's a little bit different about our academies in comparison to some of the others that Building Heroes run is that we also open them up to local people. So we have a combination in both going through. And it's amazing. And we have sort of phenomenal numbers, but also just the personal stories that you hear and the way that people talk about them and the way that our learners come through and really have in many cases, quite a confidence crisis about what they can do. And I've left the service after 17 years. Am I able to get a job? Can I do this? And yes, you can. And it's those soft skills that are just as important as actually being able to learn on the tools and learn the trades. And there's all sorts of amazing opportunities coming up ahead of us where we're developing a couple of new qualifications, one at more kind of project manager level. Sorry, I could talk about this for a lot. I said one at kind of project manager level, one around green skills, and just really try and meet the needs that we have in London as to where we have those employment sticking points.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you leave here, we've got our own academy as well. It's come from a different bit of thinking, which is that we think that architecture is not very diverse, and actually property is not very diverse, and so we're really keen that we think that the cities of the future must be designed by people that live in cities instead of people that are from the home counties, which architecture tends to attract, and also have a diversity of thinking. And so we partnered with local schools in Hackney and Tower Hamlets and Newham we have 2 pupils in every month for a week, and we do outreach stuff in the school just to actually advertise the fact that architecture is a career that you can go into, because it's not taught at school. So you get like a lack of awareness of it, and then it's sort of too late by the time you signed up to do geography or whatever. You missed the boat. So we're out there peddling, blowing the bandwagon for. And
all those people who come through, how many of them stay within the practice or stay within the sector?
So we've only done it for 4 months so far, but our idea is that, so we told them all that the best candidates will be taken back for paid work. This is unpaid weeks work, but at the end of it, there's a design competition. So they all submit their designs. There's a cash prize at the end of the year, and then we will take. So we've got everyone's contact details, and the best ones when we've got peaks, and depending on whether it's their term time or not, we'll be bringing them in to do paid work. So they're aware, because we were trying to incentivize them to. The first week that we did it, both of the girls were sick on the same day and spent a lot of time scrolling TikTok. And we were like, we need to sort of actually, because it's what's the win for them of paying attention and coming in and being really motivated, because we just assume that everybody will turn up like that. But actually, we found they weren't, because they didn't really understand what they were doing before. They were like, oh, we have to do it. So we were like, no, let's flip this around. Cash prize for the best design and potential paid work at London Living Wage. And suddenly everyone turns up every day and they work quite hard. So it's been really good, but we've learned a lot. It's not, we design buildings, we don't run education courses for young people.
Exactly the same. Like, we've learned so much in the last year that I didn't even know what we didn't know. And with every cohort of people, we learn a little bit more and we're a little bit more comfortable with it. And it really keeps us on our toes with exactly that kind of thing. And it's absolutely what the industry should be doing more of. And you ask most people what they think of developers or potentially even architects, and it usually stems from a slightly grim experience they've had with a bad landlord or with a solicitor who's tried to do something they haven't liked when it comes to moving house or whatever it may be. So actually changing those perceptions is completely crucial. And really hard.
And very hard. But actually, so I think the stuff that we're doing now is the stuff that I'm the most proud of, because it was an idea that we had 4 years ago and it was surprisingly hard to get any traction. We kept getting passed from pillar to post by people at the local authority where I couldn't make it land with the right person. And now we've just got the most fantastic 2 people who care so much and they're across these 3 boroughs, and they have an oversight of all the candidates in those sixth form academies and know where we can go into to make the biggest impact on people, like understanding of what is out there. So yeah, we've struck it really lucky now, but it took a while to get it going.
Amazing, sounds great.
Yeah, so does yours. That's good. I think it would be really good for the listeners to understand a bit about the original kind of founding partnership of Simon and Paul and their journey in the sort of early years and how that's changed.
Absolutely. So Simon DeFriend and Paul Eden, who some may know of, founded the business, as I said, just over about 25 years ago now. And the business was very much London-based, and it was individual houses and carving up houses to make flats, and largely in the kind of North London boroughs. And it has grown really organically over that time. And it's still very much founder-led. Simon and Paul are absolutely on the floor every day, involved in everything, all the time. And we've grown to an office of about 140 people. And during that time, I suppose there were a couple of kind of key big decisions that have been made. And the first was to bring our construction arm in-house. So we don't use the main contractors. We have that ability within ourselves. And that enables us not only to keep a really tight kind of eye on cost, but also a really tight eye on quality. And that's the main thing for us, quality and design, and making sure that we really are able to deliver what we say we're delivering, and in good time. We don't have some of the other the delays that other people have, because we can really get on site and get on with it. And I suppose the other kind of 2 unique things about Regal are that we have an in-house sales arm, along with overseas offices for sales as well. So we have all of that in-house. We have that ability to, again, make those decisions quite quickly. And I sit next to the sales team in the office, and they're very busy, they're very loud, but it's great to be able to have that kind of overview and oversight of everything that's going on. And then a bit more recently, there was a decision made within Regal London that we needed to diversify. And part of that was opportunity-led, about what was out there and what was going on in London. And some of that was because we have the ability and the agility to do that. So everything we get involved with at the moment has a beds component of it, but it might be a student bed, it might be a hotel bed, a lazy living bed, a build-to-rent bed, or a for sale bed. And then we have all the other parts of a neighbourhood that go alongside that. So whether it's industrial space or commercial or retail, and we have a large, significant partnership with Barnet and a land agreement with them for the regeneration, revitalisation of North Finchley Town Centre, which, for those who know it, it's very much not a destination. It's a mile-long high street with all the bits and pieces that go alongside that.
So those new models, how are they being funded in the same way, or are you having different? Are they institutional exits? So you're pre-funding them?
It really depends, and one of the beauty about Regal is that each project is different. So nearly everything we do is there's a partnership somewhere within there. So it might be a partnership with a funder, it might be a partnership with a local authority, it might be a partnership with a housing trust. So we just pre-seed a large development in St John's Wood with Central and Cecil Housing Trust, and that was a later living block and a for sale block, and the two together, kind of synergistic relationship between the two. And that's the kind of partnership that we really like, where we can actually really work hand in hand to create something much better. And so it absolutely depends. And as again, to overuse the word, that the real beauty of Regal is that we have the agility to be able to use different model on every single site.
And what's the vision going forward? We know the story of the past 25 years. What's the next 25 years? What's the next 10 years look like for Regal?
Gosh, the next 10 years for Regal. We've got a lot in the pipeline already. We've got about 8,500 units ahead of us. So we need to get on and deliver those, and about 1 million square foot of commercial space. So to deliver that, to continue to build out that pipeline, to hopefully continue to recruit the brightest and the best. And that's something which I'm particularly interested in, how we can do that and how we can make ourselves an organisation that people fight to want to come and join. It's a tough market out there in recruitment at the moment, and really stand up on that, and then talk more and more about what we're doing, whether it be our academies or whether it be the variation of different schemes. We've got some fabulous sites on the books. We've got the big site next to the Roundhouse. We've just bought Great North Leisure Park in Barnet. There's a real opportunity there. So at the moment, what's the plan for the next 10 years? Growing on the successes that we've had, and hopefully a bit more of the same.
And I think it's amazing when you think about it like that, 8,500 units and however many million square meters of commercial, the impact that you're going to have on cities, on the sort of urban fabric. And I am interested in how much of the environmental part of the ESG Regal are pushing, because obviously you've got almost like you've got an opportunity. If you can make these buildings perform, you can improve basically the performance of a small town worth of
absolutely. You brilliantly led me in to talk about our scheme in Watford. Watford is a kind of relatively mid-sized town, traditionally market town outside London. Oddly enough, 15 minutes from Euston, which most people don't necessarily know or appreciate. And Watford's office stock is, in the main, a little bit tired and a little bit of an era. And one of the things that we're doing at the moment is building a new 140,000 square foot office building. And this will have all the various sustainable bells and whistles. So it's platinum, it's Wired Score Platinum, it's Active Score Platinum, it's BREEAM Excellent, it's EU taxonomy compliant, etc., 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 etc. And this will, to use the word of Watford Borough Council, change the face of Watford. This means that we are really answering that kind of post-COVID change in office habits, where people don't necessarily want to go to an office if it's just a bit dull and there's a desk and a square of carpet. They want to go to an office that has all the toys, and it's got the rooftop bar and the gym and the yoga studio and the bike parking and all that kind of thing. And that's what this allows us to do. So we're about a year away from PC. It's going really very well, and it's something that we're really proud of doing. And it pushes us, but that's how it should be. And it's pushing us hopefully in the right direction.
But I think we chatted about this before we started recording, so I slightly know the answer. But we see that our commercial clients are much more aware of, obviously BREEAM only applies to commercial, but they're much more aware of trying to get these ratings, because there is a definite consumer demand among companies, particularly big companies actually, to be getting the best performing office space, because it's a sort of, I don't know, it might be written into their articles of association or whatever it is, that we're not finding exists in the residential market. Would you agree with that summary?
Frustratingly, I would. I think kind of consumer sector, the public, the residential buyer is a little bit less concerned, probably because their financial drivers aren't telling them that it's really important. You look into the detail of a green mortgage, for example, and actually it's not really much of an incentive. It's not enough of a push to get people to ask about it. And what we see, and we talk a lot to our peer group about this kind of thing, is that actually your average client, your average customer who's purchasing a new home doesn't really ask the question, isn't that interested? And now there's no excuse, and it's absolutely not the thing that we base our decision on, but it does mean that you're missing one of those real push factors that you have, whether it be in PBSA or offices, where you've got an occupier or a potential investor really pushing you to do that.
Are you finding that more than with the build to rent sector or with the student sector, that the end investor will make their requirements known to you and you have to deliver to quite a high spec then?
Whether they make their requirements known to you or whether you're preparing for them to come into later date.
So you are actually anticipating that they will want...
Absolutely.
highest
Absolutely.
performing EPC ratings, etc., etc. That's interesting. So we had Dan Jessico, who's amazing from Settles Earth, came on this podcast, and he said there would be such an interesting or easy lever that would incentivize homeowners, which is that you could use like stamp duty as a lever, basically. So you could say, if you buy a house and it's EPC rating A, there's nothing you can do, just pay stamp duty. But if you buy a C or a D, and you then convert it in the lifetime of the property, you could get your stamp duty back, or something like that. And it would make so much sense.
It would make so much sense.
Because then people would be aware, because they'd be thinking, what can I do? Whenever I buy a property now, obviously maybe I'm different because I'm an architect, but I'm always thinking, can I add value through a loft or a rear extension? Or if there was a simple thing where you're like, oh, I paid 25 grand in stamp duty and I'm going to insulate the walls and I get that 25 grand back, a lot of people do it.
Absolutely. And that kind of comes back to central government, doesn't it? Whilst everybody talks the good talk, actually, it's never quite high enough up the agenda to really make it into the kind of treasury thinking around real estate taxation.
Well, both parties are talking good games now. We went to the Labour Party conference this year, was it this year? Last year, sorry. And all the announcement they've made there about retrofit first and an entirely green grid, they were the right noises. I think the Tories are going to have to counter on some of that. So I think it could be the green election, this one.
I hope so. I hope so. It certainly would play into the views of many of the electorates. It's just a question of whether they've got the skills within the parties to do. We, as I'm sure you would imagine, a developer to say work with a party of whatever colour, as long as they see the challenges or the answers to the challenge in the same way as us. But this is something that's really important. You only have to look at the likes of Barnet, who flipped from being a Conservative administration to a Labour administration at the last round of local elections. And one of the first things a new Labour administration did was declare a climate emergency, along with all the other local authorities in London. But it's something that at a local level is really understood as being important.
This is good because you've teed me up to plug the BCB, the Breakfast Club briefings. So that's our, as well as the podcast, you have been to our lunch at Mifflin.
I have.
And you're coming to our event at UK Reef.
I have,
and so I think that, that the point of that BCB is, one, planning is always political. There's no, get to a certain scale and there's no real distinction between what's planning and what's politics. And the other thing is, often I think developers and planners tend to be sat on the opposite sides of the table. And the idea of the BCB is, why should pre-apps be the only time that developers and planners get to have dialogue? Because then you find out at those meetings that you're mostly talking about the things that you disagree on. But at the BCB events, the thing that I've loved about them is that you find that mostly planners and developers agree. You guys agree about 90% of things, and there's only 10% of things that you disagree about, and they're usually quite specific things to that site. And actually, it's really great. Like, mostly planners get into planning because they want amazing cities for the people that live there. Developers, mostly they're trying to do the same thing, and you mostly agree that it needs to be green and placemaking is important. So I think that's my little plug for the BCB. Glad you're coming to the next one.
Absolutely, I'll be there.
To continue the dialogue between planners and politicians and developers. I'm shocked, I think, that in the resilience of house prices, despite all of the efforts of Kwasi Kwarteng and co to destroy the property market, it's surprising that property still seems to be, or house prices seem to be quite resilient. Are you surprised about that? What are you finding that? Are you finding transactions are down as a...
No, not at all. We've had a really healthy transactional year. As you say, there was that sort of huge amount of coverage and noise around the fact that house prices were going to drop and that transaction levels were going to slow down and that we were all going to be facing apocalypse of the property world. And actually, I don't think that's been the case. And one of the things that we've been thinking about, and one of the things that I think has really stood up, is that it's a flight to quality. And actually, if you're producing something and creating something where in the right place, with the right amenity, with the right kind of priced appropriately, actually, it's really held up well.
Thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, look forward to catching up with you again in Leeds. Thank you very much.
You too.
If you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe and give us a review, ideally a 5-star one. And if you want to know more, please go to ackroydlowry.com or follow us on Twitter @ackroydlowry and Instagram with the same. This podcast supports Land Aid, the property industry charity that brings together the sector to deliver life-changing projects for young people who really need it. Visit www.landaid.org to find out how you can help end youth homelessness.